Christians, I am on the 12th installment in this miniseries that I've called Make Egypt Great Again. It's a story about a new king who did not know Joseph, which means that he did not like or prescribe to the policies that Joseph had when he was governor over Egypt under the Pharaoh that he was under. But when Joseph had died and the previous Pharaoh had died, a new king came to power. And this new king, so to speak, was this guy who was sort of like the new sheriff in town, as it were. And he was going to defy all of what preceded him, regardless of the order that was already in place and established. He was going to come in as a disruptor. A disruptor. He's going to change things. He's going to make things better. He's going to make things more efficient. But the way for him to do that is to diminish the population of the Israelites. More importantly, he wanted all of the male men to be slaughtered at birth. And he came to that conclusion when he realized that his previous stratagems failed, which was to impose over-the-top rigors and burdens and tax consequences to the people of Israel, so that he had justification to subjugate these folks and to keep them in bondage and in servitude, in vassalage, basically, to the state. Not to individuals, to the state. So when we are told in verse 12 of Exodus 1 that the more Egypt imposed rigors and burdens on the people of Israel, the more they multiplied. So the more he oppressed them, the more they multiplied. So, like a typically unwise person would do, let's continue to do the insane thing and repeat it. Let's just double down on it. Let's increase the amount of rigor and oppression and tyranny. Surely that will stop their growth and break their will. But what Pharaoh found, this new king, was that was not what took place. The exact opposite happened. The more intense the oppression and tyranny became, the more that the Israelites grew. So now, he comes down and he decides to meet with the two head nurses or the two head midwives of Israel, two Hebrew women. And he went to them to get them to do his bidding for him by telling them, we want you, when your own children are born to the women of your nation, your own flesh and blood, we want you to slaughter and slay the men when they're born, the baby boys. He is trying to get the people to work for him. He's trying to get his oppressors to work for him to add to the oppression and to facilitate his oppression upon their own people. In other words, let me hire the oppressor to oppress those who I want to oppress. This is what he's trying to get them to do, to go against their own people. He is trying to turn them into sellouts. That's what he's doing. But notice what happens. These two women, Shiphrah and Puah, he tells them, when you do the duties of the midwives for the Hebrew women, and when you see them on their birth stools, if it's a boy, you will slay him. But if it's a daughter, she shall live. But the two midwives, it says in verse 17, they feared God. They feared God. And they did not do as the king of Egypt commanded. But they saved the male children alive. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives and he said to them, why have you done this thing and saved the male children alive? Now, before I move on, I want to deal with this part in verse 17 when it says, but the midwives feared God. They were Hebrew women that he was trying to recruit to carry out his evil designs of cruelty towards their people, trying to turn them into sellouts against their own people. And so he could have done many things. Notice that what Pharaoh does, what this new king does in this chapter, he never once considers just telling the people to leave Egypt. No, this king doesn't want them to leave. He wants to take it to another level. He wants to destroy all of the men and keep the women alive so that they can do the menial tasks that Egyptians do not do and would not do and took pride in not doing. They were not agricultural people, the Egyptians. That was beneath them. They were elitist. Egypt was not unlike America today, a superpower full of people who are entitled in one way or another. Specifics may differ, but the ideology is the same. So what happens is he goes to these midwives, tells them to slay the children, the boys. They refuse to do it because it says they feared God. And so after Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, called to the midwives and said to them, why have you done this? Why have you allowed these boys to stay alive? Now, we know what he didn't know, and he should have known. They feared God. They refused to do as this evil king desired them to do, and they refused to be sellouts to their own people. They refused to do that. It was they who, for the most part, stood in the gap to preserve life. And notice, it was two women, two female Israelites who stopped this king from following through with his evil designs. They would have been the people best suited to really carry out his agenda. But these two said, no, we're not going to do this because we fear God. Now, Christians, let me say something. It is no mistake why I named this message, this series, Make Egypt Great Again. It is hard for me to escape some of the parallelisms in what I'm saying today and what I'm reading here. It is the very same type of a situation. But the most important way to combat tyranny, especially for the believers in God, the Christians, the best way is to do those things which are compliant with God. Fear him, reverence him, and he will take two people or the fewest number of people to overthrow the craft and the subtlety and the wiliness of an evil dictator or tyrannical person, authoritarian, dictator, whatever you want to call him. This is critical for us to understand because they will offer all kinds of things to people who are even willing to oppose their own people in order to achieve what they consider to be an advantage for their own ends. This king wanted to make Egypt great again, and the only way he thought that he could do that was to end the lives of countless numbers of the Israelites. It was a wicked design, and behind the scenes, we should see the providence of God at work. And he used these two women to thwart, God used these two women to thwart the plans of the king of Egypt, the biggest, most powerful nation on earth at the time. Be provoked and be persuaded.